Mother, who'd cried over my brother's company recognition. Marcus himself, still glowing from the toast. And my grandmother, who was watching me with knowing eyes. "Everything okay, Mija?" my mother asked. "Who was on the phone?" I took a breath. That was Dr. Anders Lundgren from the Nobel Committee in Stockholm. The table went silent. "I've been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. The announcement is tomorrow morning, but they wanted to notify me first." For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They simply stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. Marcus recovered first. "Wait, what? The Nobel Prize?" "Like, the Nobel Prize." "Yes." "Holy shit, Camila." He jumped up from his chair and grabbed me in a hug. "That's insane. That's absolutely insane." My Aunt Rosa's hands flew to her mouth. Uncle Miguel looked stunned. My grandmother was smiling, tears streaming down her face. And my parents sat frozen, the reality slowly dawning on them. "The Nobel Prize," my father repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "For my research on bioengineered transplant materials," I said. "The work I tried to explain earlier. The reason I spent 7 years in graduate school. The studies I finally finished." The sharpness in my tone was deliberate. I watched my father's face redden as the implications of his earlier toast sank in. "Camila, that's..." My mother started, but she couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "That's a real achievement," I finished for her. "Not like school or a presentation thing. An actual, genuine, internationally recognized achievement. One of the highest honors in science. Worth about $900,000 and a gold medal. Just so we're all clear on the significance." The desserts arrived, tiramisu and panna cotta, but nobody touched them. Other diners were starting to notice our table, the energy shift, the sound of my brother's excited voice as he called someone to tell them the news. The restaurant manager appeared again, this time with the owner, a distinguished older man named Salvatore. "Dr. Rodriguez," Salvatore said warmly. "Giuseppe told me your wonderful news. Please, tonight your dinner is on the house. It is an honor to have a Nobel Prize winner dining in our establishment." "That's not necessary," I protested weakly. "I insist. This is a historic moment. You will bring honor to Salvatore's. People will say, that is where Dr. Rodriguez had dinner the night she learned about her Nobel Prize. This is good for business, and more importantly, you deserve to be celebrated." He called over several staff members, and suddenly I was shaking hands with cooks and servers, all offering congratulations in a mixture of English and Italian. My family watched the scene unfold, this spontaneous celebration from complete strangers who understood the magnitude of what I'd achieved in a way they hadn't. When the restaurant staff finally dispersed, my father stood up slowly. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time all evening. "Camila," he said, his voice rough. I don't know what to say. You could start with congratulations," my grandmother suggested pointedly in Spanish. "Of course. Congratulations. It's beyond anything we imagined." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "Because I've been trying to tell you about my work for 7 years. I've been trying to make you understand what I was doing, why it mattered. But it was always just school to you. Just studies. Something to finish so I could get a real job." "We didn't understand," my mother said, tears welling up. "We didn't realize." "You didn't try to understand," I corrected her. "When I won the regional science fair at 12, you weren't there. When I graduated valedictorian, you left early. When I completed my bachelor's degree at MIT a year early, you missed the ceremony for Marcus's job interview. When I defended my dissertation with distinction, you chose his sales lunch instead." The words were tumbling out now, years of accumulated hurt spilling over. And tonight was supposed to be my graduation dinner too. But Dad's toast was 10 minutes about Marcus's 1 year of employment and 10 seconds mentioning that I finished school. As if a Nobel Prize-worthy doctorate was equivalent to completing a certificate program. My father sank back into his chair, looking stricken. "Camila, we never meant to make you feel invisible," I supplied. "Unimportant? Like my achievements didn't matter because I was just doing what was expected of me." Marcus, to his credit, looked genuinely upset. Camila, I'm sorry. I never wanted this. I never asked them to. I know you didn't, I told him, my voice softening. This isn't your fault, Marcus. You deserve recognition for your successes too. But those successes shouldn't come at the cost of mine being ignored. Abuela Carmen stood up and put her arms around me. Mi nieta brillante, she whispered. Tu abuelo would be so proud. I am so proud. And that's when I finally cried, not tears of sadness or anger, but of release. All those years of being overlooked, diminished, treated as less than, they crystallized in that moment into a truth I could finally speak. I was extraordinary, with or without my family's recognition. The Nobel Prize ceremony in Stockholm 3 months later was everything I dreamed of and more. I wore a custom gown, shook hands with Swedish royalty, and gave a speech about the future of transplant medicine to an audience of the world's leading scientists. My family attended. All of them. And this time, they really saw me. The night I won the Nobel Prize started with the worst toast I'd ever heard. But it ended with the most important realization of my life. My value doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition. I am a Nobel Prize-winning scientist at 26 years old, and that achievement stands on its own merit, regardless of whether anyone in my family understood it. Did I forgive my parents? Eventually. But I also established boundaries. I insisted on acknowledgement, on equal treatment, on respect for my accomplishments. And slowly, painfully, our family dynamic began to change. Sometimes the people who love us can't see us clearly until the whole world forces them to look. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you had to demand the recognition you deserved? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your worth. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. You already are. My name is Camila, I'm 26 years old, and I just graduated with my PhD in biomedical engineering after 7 grueling years of research, sleepless nights, and countless sacrifices. My family organized a dinner to celebrate, but when my father stood up to give a toast, he spent 10 minutes praising my younger brother's new sales job while barely mentioning my doctorate. I smiled through gritted teeth, trying not to cry into my pasta, when suddenly the restaurant manager approached our table with a phone in his hand. Dr. Rodriguez? There's an urgent call for you from Stockholm. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, overshadowed by a sibling who seems to do no wrong, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join a community who understands that sometimes the people who should celebrate you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Growing up in San Diego, California, I was always the smart one, while my brother Marcus, 3 years younger at 23, was the charming one. Our parents, Eduardo and Patricia Rodriguez, owned a small chain of 3 Mexican restaurants that had been in our family for 2 generations. They worked hard to provide us with opportunities they never had, and I'll always be grateful for that. But somewhere along the way, achievement became expected from me while everything Marcus did was treated as extraordinary. When I brought home straight A's in elementary school, my mother would glance at my report card and say, "That's nice, Mija. Can you help with dinner?" When Marcus got a B+ in middle school, my father would take him out for ice cream to celebrate his improvement. I remember being 12 years old when I won the regional science fair with a project on water purification systems. I was so proud, convinced this would be the moment my parents finally saw me. The award ceremony was on a Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. My parents promised they'd close the restaurant early to attend. I stood on that stage, clutching my blue ribbon, scanning the audience for their faces. They weren't there. When I got home that night, they were in the kitchen doing inventory. "How did it go?" my mother asked distractedly, counting tortillas. "I won first place," I said quietly. "That's wonderful, Camila," my father replied, not looking up from his clipboard. "Very proud of you. Now, can you help your mother with this count? We're behind schedule." That same year, Marcus scored a goal in his soccer game. Just 1 goal, in a season where his team lost more games than they won. But my father took him to Disneyland that weekend. When I asked why we were going, Dad put his arm around Marcus's shoulders and said, "To celebrate your brother's athletic achievement. He's becoming quite the player." I learned early that in our family, my accomplishments were expected. Marcus's were celebrated. Despite the lack of recognition at home, I excelled academically. I was valedictorian of my high school, got a full scholarship to MIT, and completed my bachelor's in biomedical engineering in 3 years instead of 4. My parents attended my high school graduation, but left immediately after the ceremony to handle a staffing crisis at one of the restaurants. They missed the valedictorian reception where I was supposed to be honored. "It's a business, Camila," my mother explained when I expressed my disappointment. "The restaurant doesn't run itself. You understand, don't you? You're so mature and responsible." I understood that my maturity and responsibility meant my feelings could be dismissed. At MIT, I threw myself into my studies with an almost obsessive focus. If I couldn't get recognition from my family, I'd get it from the academic world. I worked with Professor Linda Chen on groundbreaking research in biocompatible materials for artificial organs. The work was challenging, fascinating, and all-consuming. Meanwhile, Marcus struggled through community college, changing his major 4 times in 3 years. Business administration, communications, graphic design, and finally settling on general studies. My parents were endlessly patient with his journey of self-discovery. When he finally graduated after 5 years with a degree in marketing, they threw him a massive party at the restaurant, inviting everyone we knew. When I completed my bachelor's degree a year early with highest honors, they sent flowers to my dorm room with a card that read, "Congratulations. Love, Mom and Dad." They didn't attend my MIT graduation because Marcus had a job interview that same weekend and wanted moral support. This interview could change his life, my mother pleaded when I called, upset. "You'll have other graduations. How many chances does Marcus get at a position like this?" He didn't get the job, by the way. And I wouldn't have other graduations from MIT. But that didn't seem to matter. I entered MIT's PhD program immediately after finishing my bachelor's degree. My research focused on developing bioengineered materials that could reduce organ transplant rejection rates. It was important work, potentially life-saving work, and I poured 7 years of my life into it. Those 7 years were brutal. I lived on a graduate student stipend of $35,000 a year in one of the most expensive cities in the country. I shared a tiny apartment in Cambridge with 2 other grad students, sleeping in a room barely big enough for a twin bed and a desk. I worked 80-hour weeks in the lab, running experiments, analyzing data, writing papers, and teaching undergraduate classes to supplement my funding. There were nights I survived on ramen and coffee, days when I didn't see sunlight because I was in the basement laboratory from before dawn until after dark. I missed weddings, birthdays, holidays. I sacrificed relationships because I didn't have time to date. I developed chronic migraines from stress and eye strain. I gained 30 pounds from stress eating and lack of exercise. I forgot what it felt like to sleep through the night without dreaming about failed experiments. During this time, Marcus bounced from job to job. He worked briefly in digital marketing, then as a social media coordinator, then tried his hand at real estate before settling into a position as a sales representative for a software company. Each job change was treated by my parents as a brave new adventure, evidence of his adaptability and entrepreneurial spirit. "Marcus is so versatile," my mother would say proudly. "He's not afraid to try new things." When I called home exhausted after a particularly difficult week where 3 months of research had been invalidated by a contaminated cell line, my mother's response was, "Well, maybe you should take a break, Mija. You've been in school for so long. When are you going to get a real job?" A real job. As if my doctorate wasn't real. As if my research wasn't valuable. In my 6th year of doctoral research, something extraordinary happened. The synthetic material I'd been developing showed unprecedented success in animal trials. Not only did it reduce rejection rates, but it actually promoted integration with existing tissue in ways we'd never seen before. The implications were staggering. Professor Chen immediately recognized the significance. "Camila, do you understand what you've done? This could revolutionize transplant medicine. We published our findings in Nature Medicine, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world. The paper attracted immediate attention from the medical research community. I started receiving invitations to present at conferences, inquiries from pharmaceutical companies, and interest from other research institutions. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was in the lab, exhausted and stained with various chemicals, when Professor Chen found me. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with excitement. "Camila, you need to sit down." "What's wrong?" I asked, alarmed. "Nothing's wrong. Everything is incredibly right." She took a breath. "The Nobel Committee has shortlisted your research for the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine." I thought I'd misheard her. The Nobel Prize. People dedicate entire careers spanning decades for a chance at that recognition. I was 26 years old, not even finished with my doctorate yet. "It's preliminary," Professor Chen cautioned. "The final decision won't be announced until October." "But Camila, even being shortlisted at your age, with this research, it's extraordinary. Regardless of the final outcome, you need to understand how significant this is." I called my parents that evening, hands shaking with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I have incredible news." "Hold on, Mija," my mother said. I could hear restaurant noise in the background. "Eduardo, pick up the other line." When my father joined the call, I told them everything. The shortlist, what it meant, how rare this recognition was for someone my age. There was a pause. Then my father said, "That's wonderful, Camila. We're very proud. So, does this mean you'll finally finish school?" My excitement deflated like a punctured balloon. "Dad, this is the Nobel Prize. One of the highest honors in science." Yes, very impressive," my mother added. "But when will you defend your dissertation? When will you get a real position? You can't be a student forever." I defended my dissertation 3 months later. The defense was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. I sent my parents the information 6 weeks in advance, called to remind them, and sent calendar invitations to their emails. The morning of my defense, my mother called. "Mija, I'm so sorry, but we can't make it today. Marcus's company is having an awards luncheon, and he's getting recognized for hitting his sales targets. It's at the same time as your presentation thing." My dissertation defense, Mom. "This is when I officially earn my doctorate." "Yes, that. But you'll pass, won't you? You always do well with these academic things." Marcus is so nervous about his awards luncheon, though. He needs our support. I defended my dissertation to a room full of professors, colleagues, and well-wishers. My thesis committee praised my work as paradigm-shifting and among the most significant contributions to the field in recent years. I passed with distinction. My parents weren't there. But they did suggest, 2 weeks later, that we should have a graduation dinner to celebrate both Marcus's 1-year anniversary at his sales job and my PhD completion. "We can celebrate both our children," my mother said brightly. "Kill 2 birds with 1 stone." I should have said no. I should have insisted on my own celebration or declined altogether. But some part of me, that little girl who stood alone on the science fair stage, still hoped that maybe this time would be different. We made reservations at Salvatore's, an upscale Italian restaurant in Boston's North End. The guest list included my parents, Marcus and his girlfriend Jennifer, my Aunt Rosa, Uncle Miguel, and my grandmother Abuela Carmen. 7 people to celebrate 2 milestones. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, a deep blue number that actually fit my body after years of wearing nothing but lab clothes. I'd gotten my hair done professionally for the first time in years. I even treated myself to new shoes. I wanted to look like the accomplished doctor I'd become, not the perpetually exhausted grad student I'd been. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Salvatore's was beautiful, all exposed brick and candlelight, with the kind of Italian food that makes you forget every mediocre pasta dish you've ever had. We ordered appetizers, wine flowed, and conversation hummed along comfortably. Marcus was in fine form, entertaining everyone with stories from his sales calls, making our grandmother laugh with his impressions of difficult customers. He'd always been gifted at holding court, at making himself the center of attention without seeming to try. It was a talent I'd never possessed. So, Camila, my Aunt Rosa asked as we waited for our entrees, "Tell us about this PhD. What exactly did you study?" Before I could answer, Marcus jumped in. "Something about kidneys or livers, right, sis? Medical stuff. Very impressive, very complicated. Way over my head." "It's actually about bioengineered materials for organ transplants," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I developed a synthetic material that significantly reduces rejection rates and promotes tissue integration." "That sounds fascinating," Uncle Miguel said. "Can you explain how it works?" I launched into a simplified explanation, watching my family's faces. Aunt Rosa seemed genuinely interested. Uncle Miguel was nodding along. But my parents were checking their phones, and Marcus had started a side conversation with Jennifer about some Netflix show they were watching. When our entrees arrived, the conversation shifted to Marcus's work. He described landing a major client, the negotiations involved, the celebration at his office. "They gave me this huge novelty check," he laughed. "Like on those game shows." It was so cheesy, but I loved it. "That's wonderful, Mijo," my mother beamed. "You're really making a name for yourself." My father nodded approvingly. "Sales is a tough business. Not everyone has the personality for it. But you, Marcus, you're a natural." I cut into my chicken piccata, each piece requiring more force than necessary. Abuela Carmen, sitting next to me, patted my hand under the table. She whispered in Spanish, "I'm proud of you, Nieta. What you've accomplished is extraordinary. At least someone noticed." As we finished our main courses and the server cleared our plates, my father stood up, wine glass in hand. This was it, I thought. The moment where he'd acknowledge both of us, where he'd give equal weight to his children's achievements. "I'd like to make a toast," Eduardo Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying across our table. The surrounding diners glanced over briefly before returning to their own meals. "As a father, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing your children succeed," he began. "Patricia and I have worked hard our entire lives to provide opportunities for our kids, and tonight, we get to see those efforts pay off." I straightened in my chair, ready to accept his words of pride. "Marcus," my father continued, his eyes fixed on my brother. "When you were born, I wondered what kind of man you'd become. I'm proud to say you've exceeded every expectation. This past year, watching you thrive in your sales position, seeing your confidence grow, witnessing your success, it's been one of the greatest joys of my life." He paused, taking a sip of wine. Marcus grinned, his arm around Jennifer's shoulders. "Your mother and I know how hard you've worked. We know about the long hours, the difficult clients, the rejection you've faced. Sales isn't easy. It takes a special kind of person to put themselves out there day after day, to handle disappointment and keep pushing forward. You have that special something, son. You have the Rodriguez charm, the determination, the resilience." My father's voice grew thick with emotion. "When you called to tell us about hitting your targets, about earning that recognition at your company, I felt such pride I thought my heart might burst. You've found your calling, Marcus. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." He raised his glass higher. "To Marcus, may your success continue to grow, and may you always remember that your family is behind you, cheering you on, believing in you." To Marcus, everyone chorused, glasses clinking. My own glass remained on the table. My hand had gone numb. My father sat down, looking satisfied. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, overcome with emotion at my brother's 1 year of stable employment. "Dad," I said quietly, "weren't you going to?" "Oh yes," he interrupted, as if remembering something trivial. "And of course, congratulations to Camila on finishing her studies. That's quite an accomplishment. 7 years is a long time. We're glad you're finally done with school." He raised his glass briefly in my direction, an afterthought, a footnote to Marcus's story. To both my children, he added, the words perfunctory, obligatory. This time, the chorus was quieter, less enthusiastic. Just the polite acknowledgement you'd give to any minor achievement. I felt my grandmother's hand squeeze mine tightly under the table. I excused myself from the table, mumbling something about the restroom. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and let out a shaky breath. Not crying, I told myself. I would not cry. I just spent 7 years facing challenges that would have broken most people. I could handle one disappointing dinner. When I returned to the table, everyone was laughing at another one of Marcus's stories. I slid back into my seat, invisible once again. We just ordered dessert when the restaurant manager approached our table, holding a phone. "Excuse me," he said, his Italian accent pronounced. "Is there a Dr. Rodriguez here?" Everyone looked at my father, assuming the title referred to him, though he was just Mr. Rodriguez, restaurant owner. "Actually," I said quietly, raising my hand slightly. "That's me." The manager looked surprised, but recovered quickly. "Dr. Rodriguez, there is an urgent phone call for you." The caller said it was extremely important. "You can take it at the host station if you prefer privacy." My family stared at me as I stood, confused by this interruption. "Who would call you here?" my mother asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly, following the manager to the front of the restaurant. He handed me the phone. "Hello, Dr. Camila Rodriguez?" An unfamiliar voice with a Swedish accent asked. "Yes, this is she." "This is Dr. Anders Lundgren, calling on behalf of the Nobel Committee in Stockholm. I apologize for tracking you down at dinner, but we've been trying to reach you all day. Your mobile phone appears to be switched off." My heart stopped. I'd turned off my phone for the dinner, not wanting any interruptions during what was supposed to be my celebration. "I'm calling to inform you that you have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for your groundbreaking work in bioengineered transplant materials. The official announcement will be made tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. Boston time, but we wanted to notify you personally before the news becomes public." The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the host station counter for balance. "Dr. Rodriguez? Are you there?" "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'm here." I can't believe." Dr. Lundgren's voice warmed with understanding. "It's quite a shock, I imagine. Especially at your age. You're the youngest recipient in this category in over a century. Your research is truly revolutionary, Dr. Rodriguez." The committee was unanimous in their decision. We spoke for a few more minutes about logistics, the ceremony in December, the media attention I should expect. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. When I hung up, the restaurant manager was watching me with curious eyes. "Good news, I hope?" I couldn't form words. "I just won the Nobel Prize." His eyes widened. "Dio mio. This is incredible. Congratulations, Dr. Rodriguez." He shook my hand vigorously, then called over to someone in rapid Italian. I walked back to the table in a daze. Everyone looked up as I approached, their expressions ranging from curious to mildly annoyed at the interruption. I stood at the end of the table, looking at my family. My father, who'd just spent 10 minutes praising Marcus's sales achievements. My